Thank you, everyone, for being here. Such a joy to reconnect with you in this way. The Dharma has deep roots, so we keep finding each other. I practice within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, within the Vajrayana, and specifically connected to the lineage of Machig Labdran, who was an 11th century Tibetan yogini, most known for her development of the practice called Che, or cutting through, or severance. And part of her lineage is she grew up reciting the Prajnaparamita Sutra as a young child. And her writings and her teachings are really informed by those teachings. And I thought, well, this is a beautiful point of intersection with the Zen tradition and the Vajrayana, is these profound teachings of the Prajnaparamita. So I thought I'd share with you tonight a poem, or a bit of a poem, that comes from the 9th century from Aryadeva the Brahmin. It's called the Grand Poem on the Perfection of Wisdom. So Prajnaparamita, as we know, transcendent wisdom, perfection of wisdom. So just a little bit of background on this poem. One is Aryadeva the Brahmin shouldn't be confused with Aryadeva, whom we might know as a student or disciple of Nagarjuna's from several centuries earlier. Aryadeva the Brahmin, as I said, comes from he lived in the 9th century in India, and he's connected specifically to this lineage of Machig Labdran because he was also a teacher of Padampa Sanjay, and Padampa Sanjay was instrumental in bringing the teachings of Prajnaparamita and the Indian Che tradition to Tibet and connecting with Machig Labdran there. And so she was deeply influenced by these teachings of Aryadeva. So this poem is kind of a crux teaching, you might say. What I'd like to do, these are teachings, we could go on for days exploring line by line and word by word, but I thought I'd just pick out a few key lines that strike me in particular. And I'll read the first section. There's sort of 3 main sections that we can find in this poem. And the first section is ground. So it's really ground, path, and fruition. And the first 3 stanzas are the ground. What is Prajnaparamita? What is the perfection of wisdom? What is the nature of mind, the ground of being? So Aryadeva writes, the meaning of the Prajnaparamita is not to be looked for elsewhere. It exists within yourself. Neither real nor endowed with characteristics, the nature of mind is the great clear light. Separate from any kind of mental fabrication and naturally purified of conceptual recollection is the Buddha, whom one keeps in mind while practicing meditation. Neither outer nor inner, neither God nor demon, not existence and samsara's cycles, nor nirvana's beyond. Neither manifest nor empty, mind is free from any such dual appearances. This is the Buddha's true intention, his flawless, uncontrived view. If looking for a simile, one could say it is like space. So I'd like to pull out here just the first 2 lines for some further reflection. The meaning of the Prajnaparamita is not to be looked for elsewhere. It exists within yourself. So this points to this propensity I think we have in our relative lives, but also in our dharmic lives, of the search, right? The ongoing search for the better thing, the better insight, the clearer view, the greater compassion, the better meditation, the better me, the kinder me. And of course, there are all the material aspects of that, right? The better place, the better relationship, the better job, it goes on and on and on. And so it's pointing to this tendency we have, right? That somehow this sense like out there, over there, in the future, there's this more perfect reality, the more perfect insight. And you know that old story of the beggar goes out begging every day, and then when they die, the neighbors find the jewels beneath his pillow. In some ways, we're like that, looking out, begging for something more, something to become complete, to become whole, become full. And all the while, the jewel is within us. And so here, this points so directly, right, so beautifully to this, is not to be looked for elsewhere. It exists within yourself. And of course, then we say, well, within yourself, who's this me, right? We've been all our practice life, all our dharmic life, like there's no me, there's no solid self. So where is this within yourself that I'm looking into? And here I like to draw on a metaphor of the wave and the ocean, right? It's like asking the wave, what's the ocean like? And the wave says, oh my goodness, where's the ocean? And it starts asking other waves, what's the ocean like? Or maybe the ocean's down there, right? I'm up here, but if I went down, if I were somehow able to like dive down, then I could find the ocean. Or maybe if I could reach really high up, I'd get this view and see the whole ocean. And so it's that sense, right? We're like the waves looking for oceanness. And all the while, what are we? We are the ocean, right? So that existing within ourself is coming to know that which we are made of, that we are not other than, have always been, actually cannot get away from, as much as we search and look. And so then, what do we do? Is not to be looked for elsewhere. So then here, the beautiful teachings here is actually our practice is of resting more. Rest more. Machik has a beautiful teaching line. I've been pulling out these verses of Machik's and contemplating them. And one of these verses is she says, don't search, don't practice, rest in your nature. Don't search, don't practice, rest in your nature. So really, I think this is such a beautiful instruction for our practice, but really for every moment in our life. When in doubt, rest. Rest more, rest in our body, right? We know our bodies in our body. It's very direct, like anxiety, right? When we're anxious, when we're not well, we hold, we tense. So much of healing happens quite literally in relaxing the body, resting the body. Our heart, when we feel anxiety or pain in our heart and our tendency to want to cover it up or distract ourselves or fix it somehow, what might it mean to rest into the softness, the vulnerability, the tenderness of our heart? Or relaxing the mind, right? Oh my goodness, the mind, right? Always out. It's this wonderful quality of the mind, right? Out searching, looking. But what might it mean for the mind actually to rest? To be okay with not knowing. To relax in the gap. So this is where we start out. It's a wonderful way to start, right? To say, don't look elsewhere. That almost meant you could stop right there, right? We could stop right there, but we'll keep going. So here's the second section, which is the next two stanzas, which are really about path, right? So what is then the method? How do we recognize that which is not to be looked for elsewhere? So I'll read the next two stanzas. The supreme method here is to realize the nature of mind. The supreme method here to realize the nature of mind is to unite space and awareness. When thus mixing space and awareness, you spontaneously purify fixed notions such as reality and characteristics, negating and establishing. And you abide in the truth of suchness, dharmata, free from dualistic subject-object cognition. With body and mind thus in their natural state, without further intervention, a fresh awareness arises, extending just as far as the reach of empty space. In the vast expanse, remain absorbed without constraints or limits. At that time, you will experience a state of consciousness free from any support, from any sort of foundation, an awareness abiding nowhere, not absorbed in either the five aggregates or any outer object. So here are a few lines I'd like to focus on a little bit more. It's actually the last line of that first section and then the first two. If looking for a simile, one could say it is like space, right? The nature of mind. If looking for a simile, one could say it is like space. The supreme method here to realize the nature of mind is to unite space and awareness. So here, if we are to describe Prajnaparamita, describe the nature of mind, describe the nature of reality, Aryadeva is saying, well, we could use the metaphor, the simile of space. And as we know, right, what is space? We can look around and looking out at the sky and the mountain, right? All this space around us, it's space that allows everything to be. Space holds everything. It's because of space that anything can arise. Everything arises within space. If there were no space, nothing could arise. And yet, space is nothing itself. Space is no thing, right? And that's why it is able to hold everything, because it itself is not solid. It is not affected by what arises within it. And so it can hold everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Its capacity, that vastness of space, gives it the capacity to hold whatever arises. And we know, obviously, in our meditation practice, this metaphor of sky that's so often used in the same way, right? Clouds moving in the sky of awareness. So here the practice of Prajnaparamita is mixing space and awareness. And here we could say our conventional sense of space as sort of physical space or spaciousness seems somewhat void, right? It doesn't have awareness. But the space that's being discussed here is luminous space, is space mixed with awareness. It's cognizant spaciousness. And so what's being pointed to is that the nature of our awareness has that sense of spaciousness and cognizance. There's a beautiful metaphor often used in the Vajrayana tradition or story of Samantabhadri and Samantabhadra. It's like the closest you get to the creation story, if there were such a thing. So Samantabhadri, connected with the feminine, if you might say, obviously relative terms, connected with space. Samantabhadri represented as the vast openness of space, cognizant space, the ground of all being, ground of everything. And Samantabhadri, out of this space, out of this luminous, radiant space, arises Samantabhadra, and here it's characterized as the masculine principle, but it's manifestation. It's like awakeness. And then there's a point. It's like there's a point where does that which manifests out of the ground recognize itself as not other than the ground out of which it arose? Or does it see itself as different, as other? And this right here, this is the one ground, two paths. Do we recognize in our awareness, in our manifestation, do we recognize ourselves as not other than the ground? In which case, and here the metaphor Samantabhadra returns to Samantabhadri, and they're pictured in union. So the ground and that which manifests out of the ground, ultimately not two. Not one and not two. So that's, do we recognize or do we not recognize? So in our practice then, mixing space and awareness is letting our awareness be like space. That whatever arises in our awareness and our experience actually continuously points back to the space out of which it arises. You might say if there's a practice here in the simile of space, of mixing space and awareness, is again, just as I was talking about earlier, resting. Here it was almost like letting go. Keep letting go. If we consider that really our true nature, as Aryadeva is suggesting here, is vast spaciousness, we could really let go. So we can look at what is it we're grasping? Where do we cling? What do we want to hold on to? Because we don't trust that it exists within ourselves, that Prajnaparamita, that our true nature exists within ourselves. So letting go, let go even more. And so this ground of Prajnaparamita, the ground of being, it's groundless, right? There's no bottom. So there's actually some anxiety here that can arise, right? In our meditations, we probably experienced that opening, that release, and then like, oh my goodness, can't let go there. And here is saying, no, actually you can. We can rest back. And there's a kind of massive implications to this kind of view in this teaching. One is so liberating, right? If the true nature of the ground of being is this vast spaciousness, awake spaciousness, out of which everything arises and is not other than, then we could actually let go. We don't have to hold on so tight. We're not going to lose anything. You can't actually lose anything within space, right? Like if you're even at a very practical level, like if we think of vast space, if we identify at that level, if you lose something, it's only changed locations in space. It's not gone. Nothing's gone. Everything's there. Everything's held. And so the metaphor of the great mother often is used here. This vast embrace. But the other side of this spacious, this vast groundless ground is that everything is included. Everything is included. We can't get rid of anything either. We can't lose anything, but we can't get rid of anything. We can't get rid of our garbage, our external garbage, nor our internal garbage. Nowhere to get rid of anything. So actually we have to deal with everything. That's the radical implication here. No out. Not to be looked for elsewhere means there is no elsewhere to go to. Okay, let's come to the last section here, which is really about fruition. Where does the path lead us? And the path really leads us to a recognition of the ground, Prajnaparamita, as our true nature, every moment, everywhere. So here are these final stanzas. In desolate rocky mountains or among snowy peaks, in charnel fields and cremation grounds and wilderness, in villages and in towns, in caves and lonely grottos, wherever you may be, meditate on non-duality. Put this into practice during the 4 activities of life: walking, sleeping, sitting, and eating. The meaning of the unborn nature of mind as the Guru has been taught. In the course of your practice, through the blessings of the paramitas and the realization of phenomena as empty, obstacles will not occur. Within emptiness, how could obstacles arise from emptiness? So the key here, right, is anywhere, everywhere, all the time. But then I'd love to just focus a couple more minutes on these last 2 lines. Within emptiness, how could obstacles arise from emptiness? This is a good one to sort of keep on your fridge or your dashboard, or, when things start feeling really tight. So what's an obstacle? How could obstacles arise from emptiness? So what is an obstacle? An obstacle, if we think quite literally, sometimes I find this can be helpful. An obstacle is like I'm trying to get from point A to point B, and something gets in my way. That's an obstacle. And it can be quite literally as I'm driving down the road, right? And there's a stop in the road. Or it could be something I'm busy doing in my life, right? I'm busy getting somewhere here. I'm busy moving in this direction, or in this conversation, or in this meditation, or in this teaching. And then something happens. That's the obstacle. So it's the fixity of the goal that creates the possibility of an obstacle. An obstacle only can exist within the framework or reference to a destination we've set our mind to reaching. If I'm not busy getting somewhere else, then there's no obstacle. And remember from those first lines, all of this poem is about not getting elsewhere. It exists within yourself. So actually, we're not busy getting anywhere, ever. That's kind of the basic teaching here. And the view is, right, if we expand our view beyond the rigidity of point A to point B, then whatever arises in our experience, whatever arises within space is valuable, is potent, is what is happening. There's no reference, right? Even, it actually blows the mind, right? If we just think about our physical universe and it going on into infinity, quite literally, like our solar system, our galaxy, beyond the galaxy, just on and on and on and on. I remember as a little kid lying in bed and trying to figure out, like, how far does it go? But within that vastness, is there up, down, over, beside, behind, forward, backward? No. No, there's no wall you can build in space. And ultimately, there's no obstacle. So then what happens within this big view? What starts happening is, rather than seeing difficult people or difficult situations as an obstacle, we actually enter into a more dynamic relationship with it. Right? It doesn't mean that the difficult person doesn't goes away because I have this, they're still there. But I enter into a different kind of relationship with them. And here I think is really the seed of compassion. I'm actually willing to be in the presence of whatever arises before me, whether that's an internal thought experience or it's seemingly external being or situation. So within vast spaciousness, our natural compassion, our presence, total presence, because I'm not busy getting somewhere, trying to get something, make something of myself, allows me into total presence. And thus compassion with whatever arises.